Hello, Daniel and Nick.
Christian. Yeah, I am up. Been a while.
It has been a while, mate. Certainly has. Keeping well?
Always, mate. You?
I am. I am. I'm traveling a little bit. I'm in New Zealand today,
I've
but
been keeping track, mate. You've been very busy.
oh, it's yeah, good problem to have. To be fair, I like variety, and
There you go.
uh,
All right.
there you go. I can see you, Nick. Good morning.
That's good. Can you hear me?
Ken.
Oh, perfect. There you go. Excellent. Just took a bit of reconfiguration from swapping my docs over.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Nothing like last minute tech challenges.
Nah,
Absolutely.
that's why I try and get in a
Where are
couple.
you at down at the moment, Christian? You're in a hotel room, yeah?
Yeah, mate. So I'm in Auckland at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, over here for a conference, but I've spent more time in my hotel room doing calls and meetings than I have outside. But
Yeah, fair enough.
yeah, no, all good. All good. Who else we got? We got Pat's just joining us.
Morning, everyone.
Weston, go Paul. All right, I'll get some stuff ready as well here to share. So we've got a few people actually registered, so it's good that you guys are early birds. I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to share my screen.
So you made your bed there, Christian?
Yeah, the cleaners did, mate. I had to duck out of the room for an hour and go and have a cup of tea or something to give him some room. Okay, so I'll share this one. There we go. All right. Now, hang on. Now, what's this one? There we go. Move you guys over. And good morning, Paul. Yeah, so we'll wait for a few people to join us. So, and what we're going to use is you might have seen it before, use it before, Menti. You guys come across that before? It's one of those essentially online. You can ask the question, you can vote up things, and all of that. So you can either you can go to in your device menti.com. Oh, hang on. There you go. I might be able to copy a link in the chat, and then you put in that code, or you can QR code that thing, whatever works. I'll create the chat. Where's the chat gone? There. Oh, you've lost your mic. No worries, mate. Yes, I'll put the link in the chat too if that's easier.
Just letting you know, mate, I've got to shoot at 10 minutes to 10. I've got another meeting to go to.
Gotcha. Not a problem, mate. Not a problem. My goal is to at least get through the stuff that we all agree is important to get through. Well before that time anyway. So Nick, you're Mackay, aren't you? Is that right?
Brisbane at the moment, but just about to. So I'm with Mount Isa Water Board.
Right.
But it's sort of a bit of both. So based in Brisbane,
Yeah.
but with travel up to Mount Isa, yeah,
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah.
And Daniel, you're WA, is that right? Yep. Remember that? Pat, I know you're in Brizzy somewhere. And Paul, well, we'll see, mate. I'll see where you are. So we'll wait for a few other people to come in. But did someone give a thumbs up already? That's good. So I'm going to test this one out, and let's try this while we're waiting for some other people to wander in. This hopefully is one of those word capture things. So you can type in that, and then everything going well, it should display. Should display a response. Just going to sort that out. Meeting's good. So who's going to go first, put something in? So I want to test this. It's about how do you make it efficient if we have lots of people on the line, and
Mhm.
look at that.
Oh, it said to do one word. Somebody's done two.
Oh, I know. Hey, and you can't track. So it's all right. I tried to do one word. You say, what's your topic for discussion today? It could end up there's just stuff all over the place.
Yeah.
But we're testing that. Let's see who else is in the living room here.
Just so you know, I put processes.
Yeah.
Just to know that it is working. So yes.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah. So yeah.
Excellent. And Paul, is your microphone working now, mate?
Can you hear me?
Can indeed. Excellent.
Can't work out if you hear me on me earphones or my phone at the moment. Hold on.
Well, I can hear you. And where are you based, mate? Don't know if you picked that one up, Paul. Where's home for you?
Sorry, mate, I'm in Townsville.
Oh, okay. Very good. So we're kind of East Coast, and then we got one outlier on the west at the moment. That's all right. Well, why don't we? Because I know there's more people going to come in, but I also just don't want to spin the wheels because everyone's time's precious. So Daniel, you were I think on the line first. Why don't you just unmute yourself, mate? Kick it off. What's your challenge item? Whatever you want to talk about.
Look, for me today, I think it's probably really understanding the difference between controls and critical controls. I think there's a lack of understanding. I know that there's a decision tree, ICMM put out a decision tree, and you've done a variation to that, and I've seen that variation, and I think it's great. But I still think that there seems to be a lack of understanding around critical controls, and then the performance standards around those critical controls as well. There seems to be a lack of understanding around those performance standards, and people just think that a lot of critical controls are administrative controls, and it's just it's a bit of a bugbear of mine. We tend to, as an industry, focus on the wrong areas.
100%. Cool. Sorry, I'm just moving some stuff around. So out of that, because there was a few pieces in that one, mate, which we could unpack. Do you want to? Should we focus in on the difference between a control and critical control? We want to have a look at performance standards. If you could choose one bit?
Yeah, look, it's about for me, it's about understanding what is a critical control.
Yeah.
And I just think that there seems to be a lack of understanding around what is I mean, critical control by its very name shouldn't fail.
Mm-hmm.
So but yet there seems to be this unhealthy focus on critical control verifications around administrative controls, and they're not critical.
Yep.
I mean, I haven't seen a piece of paper jump out and save somebody's life yet. So from an administrative standpoint, I think personally, I feel that the only real administrative critical control would be a permit to work. Outside of that, I'm really struggling to understand whether or not the mining industry in particular is focused in the right areas around what are critical controls to the critical risks.
Yep.
In our business.
Cool. Nick, Pat, Paul, that'd be a useful thing for us to unpack. Do you guys get some stuff out of that if we sort of went through that?
Yeah, I think so. I think yeah, sorry, go on if somebody's talking before me. But yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of emphasis on the lower hierarchy of controls and the confusion of where something becomes a control and where something becomes critical. And then And then I think often we try and take the low hanging fruit, right, which is documents, procedures, PPE, rather than implement the actual higher controls, which are actually harder to implement, whether it's engineering or isolation, things like that. So I think understanding the nuance between a control and a critical control is important. And there is one thing I'd like to add to, I guess, add to that. When I've been doing this in the past, it's also some of the best processes in which to go through these as well. So not along the understanding, there's so many different ways of doing the process of critical control or critical risk management to finding critical controls, that people sometimes get confused if you go in and do one model and then you go into a different group and they're used to another model. So just understanding the processes as well to support that understanding would be valuable from my perspective.
Yeah, no worries. So how I might do this is I'll give you my view on the world and the process that we deploy with our clients, and then maybe after that there could be a space for a bit of a conversation to talk about, well, are there different views that might conflict, agree, or it could be something else that falls out of this that might be something new, because I'm keen to learn always as well. So this is a macro view, busy slide. Some of you guys might have seen this before, where if we were coming to a site and doing a full critical risk management implementation, we'd essentially follow this whole process, and the stuff on the outside is the artifacts or deliverables that are produced by doing the different steps in the different phases. So if we're thinking now in the area of controls and critical controls, in my view, pretty useful for me to talk through what are some of the tests and steps we take to go on that journey. Because that may be useful, and through that there could be some stuff there, Dan, that could be some simple tests that you're just not seeing or aren't being done in the areas that you're looking at, that if it was done might help clarify that. So I'll talk macro view, and then we'll go and look at some of these things maybe in a bit more detail. So following the process, if we think about from a critical risk management perspective, like the controls need to come from some type of risk process. Unfortunately, we sometimes see this where we say, okay, here's our list of critical controls, and I say, great, where'd they come from? And it's like, well, they're just our critical controls. So we know we need to have some type of risk-based view, and generally it's a bow tie in the critical risk framework that we use to then go and plonk, identify our pathways, where do they live, etc. So in that process, there's a few tests that we deploy. One, there's a definition. I don't have it pictured here, but a definition of a control. I'll go and find that shortly. So one, is it the simple things like, is it act, object, or a system, specific, measurable, and auditable? Is it linked to a management system? And is it relevant to the risks? There's like 5 fundamental definition things that oftentimes when we see critical controls, don't even pass that step 1 bit. Then there's step 2 here, which we'll go and look at the graphic, which is around separating out controls, what we call controls, from a support activity and a verification activity to what's a true control. So that's another test we can do. And then once they've sort of passed those 2 things, then there's the idea of control effectiveness assessments. So a different lens, then which kind of includes the hierarchy of controls is control of effectiveness. It's just a different way of doing it, and we can go and have a look at that shortly as well. And then once we've done that, then we go through the flow chart, which you've seen. I'll go and show that, which then, we've got some extra steps which essentially consider all of these things. So we're like, we can't consider a control to be critical if it doesn't pass these first 3 rounds of validations. And someone's just joined us, I think, Christina. So welcome, Christina. We're just talking about controls and the journey to critical controls. All right, so I'll go backwards. Just bear with me. Lucky I've got this pack here to go through. I'm just going to scroll up because when we're in the master class, we actually spend a fair bit of time on controls because we want to get it right. Hang on, bear with me. In here. All right. So some of you may have seen these terms before. Has anyone heard of Act Object System before? Dan's nodding. Pat, I'm going to guess say yes. Paul, Nick, have you guys seen that term? Yep. Cool. And I'm sorry, I can't see Christina. Oh. Anyway, all good. Okay, and then this one for me, which I'm really hot to trot on, which I don't see well, and certainly is what we try and unpack when we do bow ties, is they'll say, okay, well, okay, vehicle separation. So yeah, we've got the 50-30 rule where, 50 meters if you're a pedestrian on the ground, 30 meters if you're in heavy vehicles between, separating from other plant. And when we do bow ties, we don't say, like, okay, put 50-30 in there. It's like, okay, what's the document or the management system that ensures you do 50-30 rule? So it's like, well, we've got the SOP for blah, 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 blah. Cool. Or they might be saying, yeah, we've got maintenance strategies for mobile plant. Cool. All right. What's the specific maintenance strategy? Just don't make it up. Let's link it to the management system. So that's one of the tests we do. And often when we actually end up doing bow ties is we create all these gap analysis because there's some stuff that people say they do, but it's not actually in the management system somewhere. Anyway, I digress. So we call that step one. Skip over all this. And then this is the chart, which you guys might have seen before or may not. Again, I'll make this bigger. So what we're looking to do now is separate out. And again, this could be a useful framework to start to drop off these admin-y things. Dan. So for example, in this framework, so support activities are those things that maximize the health of a control. So they would be things like maintenance, training, education, procedures, SHMSs, and all that sort of stuff. They're not necessarily frontline direct controls, but they support it. And then anything that's like, reports, inspections, any other checks generally fall over there in that bucket. They're not direct controls. And so time and time again, like we'll see, what's one of the classic ones is supervisor inspections. It's like everyone throws that in on bow ties. And then when we apply this test, it's like, okay, yeah, it's great that you do that, but that's actually not a direct control. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that. So I'm not sure if you've seen this before. I can throw, well, this is recorded anyway, so you can come back and have a look at this. And then when we get into the control effectiveness assessment, so have you guys done control effectiveness assessments before? I've got to look over this way. It's where I can see you. Have you done control effectiveness in some way, shape, or form in a previous life? And girls? Yep. Okay. So this one, I mean, there's a few, and ultimately all we're looking to do is just give it some type of criteria, aren't we, an evaluation. This one here is not too bad, which is like a 2-part scale to ultimately get our controls to end up on this framework. What's highly adequate versus very good adequacy, marginal, poor is orange, and then not worth the paper it's written on in the red. So we'll go through all of that. I'll skip out. Sorry, just bear with me. I'm going to unpack that one. To then, if I get down to critical controls, pull this back together. They are, so if you know how you're saying, Dan, the ICMM pathway, that's their generic stuff here. And then what we've just added on is all of those tests that which I verbalized, must be met, and the answer must be yes, to then continue on. And one of the things that not a lot of organizations do is setting a benchmark for control effectiveness. So in my mind, why would I consider a control to be critical if it gives me marginal adequacy or less. So I think again, that, you know, like you're saying, would admin controls come out in the green? Maybe not if they've passed all of those tests. And then maybe the final bit here, and then I'll stop talking, is I've changed the language where we used to have this and just say this used to be just, well, it is a critical control. Now we've moved the dial on that, because potentially if I do a bow tie which has got 60 critical, you know, let's say 60 controls, and I could do the test and then potentially, let's say 20 come out as, well, the new language is eligible. What I don't want, and this is the trap we used to fall into, is, okay, well, all 20 pass the test, therefore all 20 are critical. And we end up in this big unhelpful discussion. So we've now moved the needle, say, okay, well, these 20 are eligible for selection. Then there's some extra tests you can do to work out of these 20, you know, what are going to be the critical few.
Yeah, one of the challenges I'm facing at the moment is to try and convince those parties in our organisation around you shouldn't have any more than 5 or 6 critical controls, and that seems to be a bit of a struggle at the moment.
Yeah. Very familiar with that one. So I'm not going to say anything more on that, because I want to make it, now we've got less numbers, we can make it more of a conversation. Does anyone have a follow-up question on that before maybe we go to comments, or a clarifying question? No? Any comments or thoughts to add?
I was just going to say, with regards to that comment from Daniel, experiencing the same thing, and essentially I'm letting them go down that pathway of, cool, you think that there's 15, well, let's explore all 15. And by the time they've gotten through about 5, they think, bugger this. So it's almost a case of, you know, it self-resolves. If you give them that rope, it self-resolves. They start to realize they're not all built or created equal. Some are more powerful than others, and it organically self-resolves. But it's a little bit painful in terms of facilitating it. It's a waste of time, but it's
very hard.
Time.
It's very hard, and at the moment I'm just going through a bow tie with and identifying the critical controls around mobile equipment interaction. I mean, we all know that in this industry, certainly in the mining industry, mobile equipment is one of the biggest critical risks that we have. And interestingly, they've gone from close to 15 critical controls down to 8 critical controls, and 72 critical control verifications down to 54 critical control verifications. Whew. It's yeah, when you're asking leaders to go out into the field and do that amount of critical control verifications around mobile equipment, that can be difficult.
And with that, because I'm doing the exact same risk right now. So copper company, Zambian mines, I'm doing it probably with a different type of audience as well in terms of knowledge base that I'd be starting from. And because I've brought all the disciplines together into one room, I've got ops, I've got maintenance, I've got tech services, I've got everybody in the room. So interestingly enough, when we have such a large volume of verifications, it seems like an enormous task. But when we then say, well, actually, let's go back to our individual disciplines, and only some apply to maintenance and only some apply to mine tech services. So by bringing them together as essentially one cohort and then separating it out, it's kind of illustrated that balance of, it probably isn't as overwhelming, but I'm only able to do that because I have a situation where nobody understands critical control management except for maybe 2 people in the room of 35.
Yeah,
so
that's a really good point, Christina, and I hadn't actually thought about it. That process is actually then splitting up those CCVs into those departments. So, no, thank you for that.
Another thing,
very good.
Another thing that I've found is make sure you're not just loading up one level in the organisation.
Yeah.
So those verifications are in layers. Like I typically would do it in 3, but Christian may have another approach. But That's really important. Another thing to add, I think, when I used to get into discussions around critical controls, and there's 15 on the table, the old way of looking at critical control before the ICMM guidance came out, we used to use the phrase, now tell me, if this control fails, is it just because of the grace of God that someone doesn't die? So we used to use that as a way to try and filter, particularly in a workshop environment, if you're just trying to get through that. We did that before we had flowcharts. So that's, but I think it's still useful from time to time just to use that analogy.
Thanks, Pat. Paul or Nick, do you guys have any comments or questions just around that component that we're just talking about?
No, I think
I don't at this stage. I'm just sort of taking it in at the moment.
Okay.
yeah, I'm the same. I think probably experienced a bit of both, but more from the oil and gas when I was in oil and gas. The approach, I think, like you said, of getting more disciplines or more departments into the room was always better when we were doing things like this, because you bring then when you want to do some of them further steps, it's easier to then continue the processes for the areas where their critical controls are, because they're not always necessarily sitting within one group. So I do think what Christina says is really valuable, and also what Patrick said about that across the layers as well. So trying to get that horizontal and vertical integration across the business.
Would anybody break it down further than those three? Because I hear what you're saying, Pat, that I break it into kind of that human factors of systems as managers, processes as supervisors, and tasks as workers. I work for an organisation that is very lean at the very top of the organisation, but in terms of like hierarchy at mid-tier, you've got a head of department, then there's managers, then there's superintendents, then there's coordinators, then there's technical. There's all these layers before I even reach supervisor. And to group them into this is a management type system feels to me a little too generic. I'd be curious if anyone had any advice on, should I maybe look at splitting systems for managers maybe into two categories? Of, systems, you have the influence, the authority, the funding, because we know there's different layers, versus systems in terms of, you might be the person who approves the plan or designs the TMP or something such as that. You coordinate that effort of that system design, but somebody else actually says, well, I'm going to make the funding available for all this to happen.
Maybe I'll provide a different lens to look at that. And that's what I've got up here. Hopefully, can you guys see my screen again? I've sort of stop shared. So go backwards to go forwards. What I see time and time again, and the reason why I'm sharing this, because if you guys are designing verification stuff now, is hopefully don't fall in the trap of the things that I'm now unwinding with lots of companies, where that hopefully this table makes sense, just kind of broke out work into, the environment, systems, equipment, people, and then we've got a few layers, if you like, the worker does some stuff, supervisors do some stuff, and then we've got all these existing checking things. Some are structured, some are ad hoc in place. And what I see time and time again is an organisation will then invest in critical control verification, say, yep, we do all these verifications and send them out and we're all green as good. And when I look at the question set, it literally duplicates what either this person does or this person does here. Yeah. And to me, that is just a complete waste of resource. We're not looking at the right thing. And the analogy I give people is same thing when you do an ICAM. We want to understand the direct cause, but we want to understand the systems that enabled that failure and direct cause. So therefore, in my mind, when I'm thinking about verifications, I need to add a column here. Level 4 is like, what are all the systems that need to be checked that drive all this stuff downstream? So if I see a verification says, oh, go and check 3 hot work permits and is everyone trained? I'm like, no, we've missed missed the boat there on that. So we do then a fair bit of work when we're designing our performance standards. Okay, what are the system checks we can do? And it's not saying there aren't frontline. I mean, there are some direct observation things, but
Yeah.
it's certainly not weighted in the direct observation. It's more the systems. So once we've mapped it out, then, and I'm starting to get to what you're talking about, Christina, then we can look for, I was saying to someone yesterday, how can we piggyback off existing stuff? So if we've said we're going to check all of these things, and this can help with the volume, you know, I might have checked 75 things. Okay, and one of these things is we need to do a direct observation of something, I don't know, every 3 months. Then my needed question is, well, what is the process right now that goes out every 3 months to that area, maybe, or that thing? Can we piggyback off that? Cool. All right, we'll just add that into that thing. Then you don't have to create this new verification for someone else at some other point in time. Then I guess with the systems, it's the same type of thing. Can we piggyback? Is there already a assurance audit thing? Okay, can we just move some stuff over there, and out of what's left, okay, it might be a standalone thing, and then, you know, we assign it out that way. What I also would say, again, is the verification questions, if I use that term, in my view, need to be mini work instructions. So it's absolutely clear who, what, when, where, what does good look like, what does bad look like. And if we then do that, then it opens up the pool of people who can do that verification, because I'm not relying on someone's expertise who has to interpret what the thing's asking for and then apply their expertise to go and do that. It's like, oh, do this, check this, cool. So potentially a system check, you know, what you're talking about, or the thing, we've got 75 things. It could be a frontline worker, could be one of the ones that does a verification if the organization's up for that, or supervisor, or anyone in an office-based role. I'll stop there. I could talk forever. Thoughts, questions, ideas?
So just to jump on that one, then if you've actually had that layer 4 with critical control systems verification, that's where your management team, your line managers, would actually go out and do their verification around the effectiveness of the systems to manage those critical controls.
And add to that, in my view, it doesn't have to just be managers. I mean, yeah, great managers do it, but why can't a superintendent or a supervisor or a safety advisor or whatever, if it's written out clearly enough, I don't need to be a manager to do that thing.
We had this conversation last night around, you run the risk of making it sound a bit like stay in your swim lane if we're too prescriptive on the levels. And, you know, I was challenged last night to, you know, but that's not who we are as an organisation, and we really want everyone to be thinking for themselves. And we talked about, you know, career progression as well, in terms of, could you be seeing it as building blocks for people, and particularly people that are identified as future leaders? And, you know, even health and safety reps got brought into the conversation of, in our organisation, you know, there's remuneration for being a health and safety representative. So, you know, could we add that? Could this be an additional incentive? So I thought that was a really interesting conversation to be had, that you're right. If we say, it's a case of saying, yes, this is a systems control, but certainly anybody could look at it.
Just to respond to that, I've seen that process before, and look, I think we have a framework about levels in the organisation, but we also need to bring in some, I guess, I don't want to use the word common sense, but if you know your organisation, there's some people who should be doing something, and there's some people who aren't as good as that. Now, that could be to do with capability, experience, span of control. Like, for example, the safety officer, there's no reason they can't be doing observable activities where they can observe something which is part of assessing the critical control in action. So you're right. I think we have a framework, and then we do what's best for the organisation without losing the integrity of what we're doing. And that way the organisation will respect us, because they can see we're working within existing systems. You know, we're understanding the business has, you know, it's not there to verify critical controls, it's there to make money. We're there to help them do it safely. So I think that rationale applied through the workshop, you'll get greater ownership as well.
I think looking at the system controls is more of a proactive, I think, approach to it, whereas a lot of people do take reactive approaches, which is probably the wrong way of looking at it. So sometimes verifications can be reactive, where we should look at proactive.
Just to throw it out, obviously when we go through and identify a critical risk, let's say working at heights, we might identify 3 or 4 critical controls around working at heights. There might be another 10 controls. How do you actually apply the frequency of checks, and what sort of, I mean, do you just do a catch-all audit on them biannually or annually? Because there does also, interestingly enough, there does seem to be at a senior level a focus around those controls, and are they effective and adequate in our business, as opposed to just the critical controls. And look, my preference is if we get the critical controls working right, the rest tend to take care of themselves. But how are the rest of you doing it in regards to capturing the rest of the controls when we go through this bow tie analysis?
I'll start. It's a very very common question, certainly for organisations. You know, so I'm aligned with you, Dan, where maximum of 5, and let's say they've come from 8. And it's like kicking and screaming and all that, but I eventually get them to the 5, then they're like, oh, but those 3 are still really important. It's like, yeah, cool, all right. Then the conversation moves to, okay, well, we're not going to do a full verification program or strategy on them, but we can do some stuff. And if there's already been verification set up, then we can use that as a starting point to then say, okay, well, how could we do a 6-monthly thing or something on that widget or whatever the thing is. And that's often how I've moved through that is, okay, for those things you still call important, we're not going to call critical. We'll do some type of check. And again, look to, because again, I'm a lazy brain. Is there already something we can piggyback off? So is there already an annual equipment audit or something like that? Okay, can we go and slot it in there as opposed to creating new work for someone to go off and do? And then when we've exhausted all of that, then it's like, okay, what's the check look like? How often? And then I guess your question around frequencies, maybe if we get time, I'll show at the end. When we're pulling together critical control verification frequencies, we use the Australian standard for, can't remember the name of it, I'll go and find the slide shortly, which gives you a good framework to be able to develop statistically valid frequencies for checks.
Okay, that's great. I'm actually going to throw a little curveball now. Hazard reporting. One of the things that has interested me in a long time in the mining industry, especially over in Western Australia, is that there is a tendency to focus on the numbers for reporting. Got to report so many hazards per month in order to get your bonus at the end of the year. So my concern is that I don't think that there's a link being where they're actually doing analysis around those hazards to actually understand whether or not those hazards are actually linked to failures in the critical controls. And that concerns me as an industry, that we're not doing that. And if we were then to find failures in those critical controls, to be able to then go back to the critical control verifications and start driving some accountability and saying, you know, Christian, you've the last 6 months, you've done so many critical control verifications on this critical risk. We've just actually got hazard reports that have come in that have identified that this control wasn't in place in the first time.
Yeah.
You know, I think as an industry, there's no link there from hazard reporting to critical control failure modes.
So in the verification process that we're building, we are building those thresholds in as triggers. And I know this kind of, it doesn't contradict one of your recent posts, Christian, but in terms of digitizing this, everyone's really hungry to see this digitized. That happens towards the end, but the ability to have that link is there, I feel, is so all of our information goes into a data lake. With the increasing use of AI, the ability to say, what are your thresholds? What are your red flags? Also, what are your green flags? What are my leading indicators to show me how well this is working? That's what we're building. We're building all of these red flags so that can be pulled from the data lake, and we can do the analysis to say, we're seeing a frequent issue with this very specific hazard around heights. That is going to trigger a review of the data sheet. If we have to update the data sheet, that triggers a review of the bow tie. If we have to update the bow tie, that triggers a review of the BBRA. So we've built a nice continuous improvement cycle. And the way that I got buy-in for that, interestingly enough, when I said safety, 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 no one was interested. Couldn't get the big players in terms of like a group IT across the business, because they've got so many priorities, and this was quite a lower order priority for them. Fair enough, but the bow tie methodology is going to be used for enterprise group risk, because everyone went, that seems really simple. Why wouldn't we do that for ESG as well? And why wouldn't we do that for everything else? And as a consequence, everyone went, wouldn't it be great if we digitize that? And I said, yeah, it would be fabulous, because we're waiting for it. So we had a win, but we had to be slightly kind of covert about it and say, this is actually a really fantastic model for things outside of safety. This could be utilised for everything, guys. So that's how we're bringing that hazard link in. It's proving quite effective, but it comes back down to the culture that you have, whether people trust they can speak up. What are the consequences for hazard reporting? Is it motivated by remuneration, or is it motivated by something else? So we then have to unpack that.
Yeah, I think unfortunately at the moment in our industry, it seems to be quantity over quality. But anyway, and yeah, it does concern me that it's an exercise in futility, because we're actually not actually linking it to critical control failure modes and actually getting the benefit out of it. So that's interesting. I appreciate that, Christina. And yes, I know everybody's looking for that panacea of a digital process, but people need to remember too that it's a system. Systems don't drive the business drives the system.
Yeah. Nick,
yeah, I just on that. So I come to critical risk management from an opposite perspective. So in the water industry, we use critical controls more for process management, and so through that HACCP lens. So it's been really helpful trying to get engagement for moving into the bow tie model for safety as well, because they already understand critical control points from a process perspective. So what you're saying, Chris, is that buy-in from some of our systems is already there. So bringing this into that from the particularly the oil and gas and mining industry into water has been really, really valuable, because they see it more as an integrated approach now. The biggest risk, I guess, which is I think what we alluded to earlier, is what you're saying on the verification and supervision. When you start integrating some of these things, you can end up duplicating things, or you build a verification step into a Take 5 or a site inspection or an annual inspection, and we're often doing the same thing in multiple places. So sometimes the integration adds to the clutter, which can then create more noise for people. So there's definitely a balance to how to use the different tools across businesses, if that makes sense.
it does, mate. Very well said. And yeah, if you're not designing your verification process strategically, you can end up with pockets of stuff all over the shop.
I think the other risk to that as well is the people that are doing it will end up into a tick and flick mode, because they've just done a 2-monthly inspection on something, and then a month later you're asking them to do an annual inspection, which includes most of the stuff they've just done 2 months ago. And then there's a gap there that there may have been a failure in that time between the two ones, but because they've just done it, they're just, I just did this a couple of weeks ago, everything's a good tick, 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 tick. And so designing the system so that you're you're not entering them spaces is really important.
There's
Yes.
There's a paper that was written around Sunrise Dam. I don't know if anybody's seen that one. So Sunrise Dam over here in WA, Anglo, someone did they wrote their thesis, and it was all around this exact issue of that digitising this isn't the silver bullet. And they went through and they demonstrated, you know, the BBRA, the bow tie was done, then the verification process was done, and then they set about doing exactly what you said, Christian, was they set about finding what all the processes that currently exist out there, that you do all your checking. Let's bring them all in. Let's go through everything. Let's scratch off anything that doesn't need to exist. Let's check it once. Let's check it well at each level. And they've got the statistics in there which kind of show, you know, digitising it isn't the be all and end all, and that the fundamentals lay elsewhere, but they also have the numbers in there of just how many useless inspections they were able to get away from, those tick and flicks that were happening. It was something like 900 down to 70 or something like that. It was unbelievable.
There's sorry, I'll just finish that off and then hand over. So there's a global mining house I'm helping at the moment, and they did 28,000 verifications last year. And so talk about overwhelm. Yeah.
I'm going to ask a curly one. So we see this task of introducing or pivoting towards critical control management within the sector, and it's safety practitioners like ourselves. And in terms of that point of failure or the vulnerability that the company then has, in terms of how do you embed this so that you don't end up with that situation of 28,000? Because I suspect when they started out with CCM, that wasn't their desire. Their desire was probably, it's a simple methodology. But over time, as safety professionals, we tend to get a bit excited. Things maybe don't get executed right through to the end. Sometimes we start things, we don't always finish. And you end up with this product that started out very simply, but has now become something else. And I feel that we don't have enough knowledge at enterprise level, at site levels, of people who actually get this. You know, I'm walking people through it, literally holding their hand, understanding that I'm going to have to explain this at least 11 times to them before this starts to sink in. Just repetition, repetition, repetition. But I think that we're very, very vulnerable because there's this view that Chrissy can come in and she can sort out critical control management for us. Well, Chrissy can, but if Chrissy wins the lotto tomorrow, you're buggered.
Yeah. I've got a view, but you go, Pat, first. You've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, look, I've been doing critical control work for some time, and my experience is there's a significant lack of expertise amongst the safety fraternity.
Yeah,
and it's underestimated how complex the topic can be, and the pitfalls that are there, which you're experiencing, which we've been hearing about today. So I think the safety group as a whole aren't doing each other a lot of favors by launching off into something without doing enough research and understanding, and looking for benchmarking and better practices. That's my experience. It's quite challenging and it's difficult when people are passionate and you've wound them up in a workshop and you got them in the right place, and then you're trying to tell them you got to try and wind them back a bit. It's not an easy task, and that facilitation skills is another element which not all safety people have. It's not easy to control a group like that without losing them. So often I've found it's sometimes better to outsource the facilitation, and that gets a better result for me. And previously I've done that. Not that I couldn't have done it myself, but if I use somebody else to do it and then I participate as a member, that helps me guide the group. So the facilitator's got a sidekick in the room, just as that's worked well for me before. When you're the leader and you're the expert at the same time, I think you don't do a good as job as you could if you were just one of those roles. Anyway, hopefully I haven't gone off track there.
I also think there's a big gap for the regulator, and I say that because I worked for the regulator here in WA for 10 years. The regulator is so far behind over here the
Absolutely.
point where I'm in private industry now and they're saying to me, hey, heard you're up to this. Can you come and speak? And I'm thinking, you need
Right.
the skills within the regulator. If industry is ahead of the game, like the horse has bolted, industry's doing this and the regulator's trying to play catch up and they don't understand. And then they're issuing notices that are contradictory to what you're actually trying to achieve. It's unreal.
Yes.
Agree. Don't get me started on the regulator.
I can take it.
Yeah, no, it's not. You're not with them anymore. I've offered numerous times at Olive Branch, and just
I've given them your details, Christian. And I've said, this is the guy. Call the guy.
We'll
Don't
see.
ask
We'll
me
see.
to speak. Call this guy. I
See what
can train
happens.
him. This is what you need to do.
But so transactionally, coming back to your question, and this is one of the things I've been thinking about too, is the critical risk management process. It's a system, like change management, incident management, all that sort of stuff. And we have assurance processes for each of those systems. Therefore, the critical risk management process, in my view, should have, well, I use the term effectiveness, and we're right now designing out effectiveness audits for critical risk management. So we can monitor how effective is it, and then if we're doing them, or if organizations are doing them on whatever the frequency is, that is something that could help to mitigate going off track and ending up with this behemoth in 5 years.
I can't wait. That's exciting.
Yeah, because that's what we can see is happening. It's happening now in the Queensland mining industry. Now they've just legislated critical controls. Every man and his dog and woman is now just going off and doing critical control management. It's already starting to become a cluster.
It's a tough subject to deal with. Like, the critical in my experience of critical controls first surfaced for me around 2004, 2003. A lot's been done on it since. And the organisation I worked for then, which was a global resource company, they've been through different variations of trying to get that right, and to the point where they've had a run where they had no fatalities for a while. And they thought they nailed it, right? And now they're going back in there and having a look, and they've got too much. They've overcomplicated. That's because the expertise has left the company. But this is coming back to the Christine, right? So the expertise has left the company, and everybody's an expert. As a safety professional, I often have this phrase: everybody's an expert in safety, because we have operational people speaking their mind, which could be correct, could be not. But the fact they're speaking is great, but they're not the expert sometimes. So I think critical control management comes back to this. Not everybody's the expert, even though they may talk that way. They just don't have because they're not looking at it, not looking at the complexity here.
I'm so glad you mentioned that example, because I sat in a meeting in October and someone said to me, but this global company, they've been fatality free for 5 years. How do you explain that?
I gotta go.
Catch you later, mate.
Been fantastic. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Sorry, and someone asked me, how do you explain this, Chrissy, that this organisation's been fatality free for 5 years? And I said the same thing. I said that expertise left the business a while ago. You're going to see a lag, because that expert is now out offering those services elsewhere, and he's fantastic. But certainly that single point of failure being that person's left, the octopus tentacles are out of the suitcase now. How are you going to put them all back in? Because everyone's going to run away and do something slightly different. And that's such a compelling point you make.
What also happens is it's hard to get interest and passion around something that's not happening. And so the better you get at it, the more work you got to do on keeping people motivated and focused on how important things are, because their focus drops off. Everything else is competing priorities. So that's one of the tricks as well. So if you become good, then it's hard to stay there. It's anyway, that's another thing I think gets in the way.
Paul, we've all talked a lot.
Yeah.
Thrown some stuff in. Do you have a specific question, mate, or a comment, or something you're curious about? We've got 10 minutes left.
Yeah, so no direct question. Like I said, I'm just taking it all in, because I can see, just listening to everyone talk, that we are way behind the times. So, and I am looking into, ways to implement critical risk management into our systems. And without, like you said, making a big cluster, I want to do it once. I don't want to, try different things and go down the wrong path. So that's why I'm including myself in these conversations and trying to learn more about it. Best ways to go. I've seen a few of your videos, and we've got you talking here in Townsville. Well, not you directly, but in press in a couple of months' time in Townsville. So, yeah, we just that's all I'm looking for at the moment, and just do it once, try and do it right the first time.
And there's a cool term, I didn't come up with it, but I like, is right sizing as well. So don't try and do the BHP or the Anglo way if you're not a BHP or an Anglo.
No, correct.
There's just no point. So that unfortunately, that's where, like you're saying, Pat, that's where a bit more of that knowledge base comes in, because how can you do it this way for your organization and it doesn't fold on itself? Yeah, cool. Well, thanks, mate. Nick, anything you want to throw there, mate, or a question or a comment or something, mate?
No, probably the same as Paul, like coming and being in various high hazard industries over the years. I think Patrick said it, it's like it's about trying to understand when you're the expert or how to facilitate experts. So forums like this are really important to continue that knowledge growth, and rather than just thinking, oh, I did this 5 years ago in one industry and I can translate it into another. So like you're saying, right sizing, it's also industry sizing as well, because the principles that we're specifically focused, I guess, on as mining as a group, and I've just left mining to move back into water, but the same processes, they're starting to use these processes. So rather than going in saying, well, I did this in mining, I'm just going to translate it directly into mining, it's just facilitating these discussions and having that broader understanding about how do we do things, how do you strike that balance between decluttering so that you can see the real critical controls, and not making everything a critical control, but then not missing the real critical controls. So it's very much like Paul, I think, just keeping that knowledge growth through networking and like you said, sometimes bringing in outside experts to facilitate these processes so that you can participate in the process with your organization as opposed to trying to lead it can also be really valuable. So yeah, definitely creating them networks and trying to understand how this can be translated, not just within the mining industry, but in broader major hazard facilities.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, mate. Hey, Pat, do you have a question or a comment, mate, or something like that? Oh, I've seen you.
Look, I think I guess from my experience, another challenge is we get under a lot of pressure from the organisation to get it done, and I think we don't do ourselves justice if we try to move too fast and we get overwhelmed and we overwhelm the organisation. I've gone in and with a whole team of people and just done the job, or is it better to focus on one risk first and get people over the line with one risk and then move on to the next stage? So I think implementation is another important part to look at. If we're talking about acceptance of from the organisation, and maybe the pace, what can the organisation handle? Because I've gone in before when there's been a lot of things happening in organisations and it's all about critical control management. You end up competing too much and the organisation becomes stressed and they can't put the effort they need into this. And another important thing is to have the buy-in from leadership. If you don't do the work with the senior leaders, the critical control management program often falls over because the importance is not there. And they're the guys that decide the priorities in the business ultimately. So if you don't have them where you need them, they'll decide in a year or 2 years' time, they'll make a decision which will impact your critical control management program. So that's the end of my speech. That's
I like it. Christina, do you have another question or a comment or a perspective?
Thanks for organising this. I agree with Pat. Thanks for bringing it together. Love your work. love what you're doing. WA is so far behind. We don't even talk critical control management. We talk principal mining hazards because we missed the opportunity to, harmonise at that point in time. And, we're paying for it dearly because people don't understand the language. Unless someone works for a very big organisation, they don't understand that language. They still talk about a principal mining hazard and they don't see the relationship with CCM, which is detrimental. But I agree with Pat in terms of you need to have that buy-in from the top. I've seen one of our GMs who wasn't on board, it was his demise. That's how seriously it's being taken in terms of, get on board or go, because everyone else is definitely on board with this. What I'm finding is I need to be really dynamic though. So there is only one of me, there isn't a team. And I was running the process kind of, this is the broad brush, this is the bow tie, this is the CCB. And now what I'm doing is I start every session with each different group. I run them through the training and the coaching first of why we're here, but then I say, what's keeping you up at night? And then that's what I tackle first. So exactly as you said, Patrick, I will say, great. So for mining, I'm going to bring all the mining groups together globally, and we're going to tackle these 4 things. So we're just going to start with vehicles, all things vehicles. And what I've also found has been really beneficial is I'm creating like a Rubik cube almost of, it could be used for any vehicle at any time. We're not getting into HV, LV or mobile equipment. We're just saying vehicles are vehicles, and we need to talk about all those risks. And we're just tackling the top 4 first because I just don't have the resources to pivot and to address everything. But I was going to ask, Christian, is that I've got one group who is very, very concerned about contractors. Everyone's concerned about contractors, but I have one group specifically they work in the local community there. So they are not on the mine lease. They actually work the ancillary to that. And they get all the contractors that everyone else has essentially rejected. So we are talking very, very low skilled workers, very, very low remunerated workers who interact with the public, who are in the line of fire, who might fall from heights, who are getting around in mobile equipment in congested environments. And I'm contemplating, I want to chuck that actually in as a critical risk in and of itself, contractors, and just bow tie it out and see where we land. Thoughts?
Yeah, a few. I get it. Totally get the scenario. And it's interesting. So if I think about contractor management, it's not a principal hazard, it's a principal control in effect,
Yep.
isn't it? It's a control that's across lots of different risks. And so the same scenario applies in the Queensland mining industry, where they've said, for example, one of the principal hazards is failure of emergency response. Like, go figure that out. It's like a failure of a control is called a principal hazard, and then sites go and do a bow tie and a failure of a control, and we end up in this circular thing. So bow tie, so this is a long way around to say, okay, bow ties obviously are designed for a loss of control of energy. I have seen like principal controls systems, like failure modes effects analysis assessments have been done on the systems. That's maybe more applicable, a little bit more complex. I have seen, we could just replace the middle of the bow tie being, okay, failure of contractor management, and it probably will get out a fair bit of stuff. I think as long as everyone's aware that, hey, we're kind of using this tool, which is normally done this way.
Yep.
We're doing it that way. Would I call failure of contractor management a principal hazard or a material risk? Probably not, because we're saying a failure of a principal control. And this is not a bad parallel. I had this conversation yesterday where what we're starting to see is it's like a table-based matrix view where we've got all of our material risks. Let's say it's a vertical top-down, we go broad brush, bow tie, critical controls, blah, 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 down the verification. And then on the side, we've got all of these management systems like change management, incident management, contractor management. They all sort of flow across the vertical things, and we end up with, we want to have that matrix. I think I did that video recently where we want to be able to nail both aspects. I don't know if that helps or I've sort of wandered off paths there, but that's
No,
my,
it does, because I'm thinking the same thing. The tool isn't designed for that, but can I put a square peg in a round hole to generate the conversation to get the right controls out, and then say to people, but what could you be responsible for at a system level? And then what can a supervisor be responsible for at a process level? Because we're not getting it right. And there's this just kind of hands off of, contractor safety management's this big elusive thing that no one can seem to grasp. And I'm saying, well, you haven't even got the commercial process right. So get the commercial process in place before you ask me to come in and try and fix it.
yeah. And if people are on the bow tie journey and kind of get it, then it's probably makes sense, doesn't it, to bow tie that? They're not going to know any different.
No, they won't.
No, that's it. Look, I'm happy to keep chatting, but do any of you guys need to go or girls need to go? Because you got other things to do. If you do, awesome. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, now I'll probably need to head off now. I've got 12:30. So probably need to get in prepared for that before I hand over. But thanks, Christian. You're coming down to Brisbane next week, aren't you? And
I am, mate.
Is it-
We're doing a
is it
networking thing
yeah,
next
yeah,
Wednesday
so-
night. Watch out if Pat's there. He drinks way too much red wine, so just keep in.
that's right. So I'll hopefully catch you guys up next week.
Yeah.
And like, I really appreciate your time and expertise. It's always a pleasure sharing knowledge with other people.
Yeah, too easy, mate. I get just as much out of it. So thank you
Yeah.
for your contributions as well.
Catch you soon.
I might sign off too.
Yeah, no worries, mate. Good thanks for coming along.
Are you getting across to WA anytime soon?
Maybe I did, not telling a lie. Someone from DMERS who runs a conference, they said something's happening in July and they just said, oh, maybe you could speak, tell me what your rate is. So I told them that. So who knows, I might have just done myself out of a job there. But potentially July, if that comes off, I might as well just run a masterclass while I'm over there and do some other stuff.
Run a masterclass for the inspectors, mate. That's just what's needed. We got a notice around that exact point of emergency response the other week, and these are people I trained myself in things of, as you say, trying to recorrect and course correct, and to see those bad habits slip back in, just scary.
If you're able to, if there's someone that you know in there that I can at least have a chat to, because it's a bit hard to come through the front door, because then it's just, you're like everyone else. But
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I've given the detail to the chief over here and said, this is the person.
Okay.
But yeah, they're really pushing quite hard for us to hand over our content, and they're trying to use their regulatory powers to do that. And I don't want to do that when I keep saying, go to this person actually offers that as a service. So
That's a bit cheeky.
tell me about it. All right. Well, thank you so much for organising.
Thanks, mate.
Really appreciate it, and nice to see everyone.
Yeah, good on you. See you next time.
Catch ya.
Yeah.
All right, you're off, Pat. Cool.
Yeah, I'm off.
Next week, mate.
I'll catch. Yeah, okay. We'll catch you then.
Yeah,
Got a bit to talk about.
Yep.
Okay.
certainly do. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks for that, Christian.
No worries, bud. Any last minute things on your end?
No, not really, mate. Giving me a lot to think about, which is good. And I, we're just a small quarry. I know risks don't change, and even in a small quarry, but we have the same issues with contractor management as well. So it's, they're a great risk in our quarry, because we have them coming in from civil sites, coming to a quarry, different game. So yeah, we have different levels, but I think getting onto this critical risk management is going to be a good thing. And like you say, it's legislation now, so
Yeah,
we've got to get onto it.
absolutely. Get onto it. And I like what Pat said. If you don't rush it, you can actually end up in a far better scenario and situation as an organisation than before you started on this journey.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking for, a good pathway and a good, good direction to go with it. And I'll be giving you a call pretty soon, I reckon, just to give us some guidance in that.
Yeah, mate. Absolutely happy to. There's also, I don't know if you've seen some of the things, I might have shared it or not. We've got a critical risk community. It's called the Accelerator, which might be beneficial for where you're at. So we have calls like this every fortnight. We've got a library and we've got an online platform where we share and ask questions and everything like that. And it's really helped those organizations that maybe can't outsource everything or don't have a budget, but it's just, it's a 12-month thing where you're just able to just go and ask the question, get some information, and get supported across the long term. So something like that might be helpful for you based on what you describe where you're at.
Yeah, that might be good. Yeah. Can you send me another link for that?
I'll send you a link to
That'd
that,
be
and you can suss it out and let me know any questions. It's a really good.
And you're not going to be able to attend our safety health conference in.
Unfortunately not, mate. I'm holidaying with my wife in the UK. But Phoebe, who's done a lot of critical risk management work for us, she will go and present. So yeah, I think you've mentioned about the time block. I know what the dates are, the time block, and all that sort of stuff. So we'll just make it all happen. Yeah, we can certainly.
And let us know if that time block needs to change, or we can look at changing that if we have to.
Yeah, we'll do, mate. We'll do. Thanks for the opportunity to present. I'm really passionate about this, as you know, and the more people we can help and get the right information early, the better it has to be.
Well, I came across you just watching YouTube videos, actually.
Oh,
when I first looking up CRM.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that's how it come about.
Oh, I need to put more stuff on YouTube, I think. Yeah, I put plenty on LinkedIn, but not enough on YouTube. Are we connected on LinkedIn? We are, aren't we?
We are,
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's good. Cool, mate. All right.
Very good. All right. Thanks a lot for that.
Too easy, mate. We'll chat to you next time, hey?
Will do. Thanks a lot.
All right. Cheers. Bye-bye.